All right, share. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about enlightenment versus entanglement, which are two philosophical movements. And enlightenment happened in the 18th century, and people usually think of it as beginning the modern world in a certain sense. And then the second thing I'm going to talk about is a new philosophy that's developed relatively recently, that a lot of people talk about as entanglement, maybe over the last 30 years. And entanglement is, the philosophy of it is really related to the concept of affordances in media, in technology. And so that's why I wanted to talk about these two different movements. So this is a painting of some of the 18th century philosophers, the French philosophers who really spearheaded the Enlightenment. Voltaire, Rousseau, Diderot, they wrote the encyclopedia, all kinds of new knowledge forms that came into existence during the 18th century, dictionaries, encyclopedias, and I'm trying to think of other things that came into it. Well, the novel came into existence and hadn't been in existence before. So all different kinds of new media forms that were enabled by the medium of print. And during the 18th century, it was shifting from being just little bits of print, coterie printing they called it, shared among elites, to mass printing when the steam engine was invented at the end of the 18th century. And that's when knowledge could get out to everybody. So there's an essay written in 1784, towards the end of the 18th century. A journal had posted a kind of a contest saying, you know, who can best answer the question, what is enlightenment? And people have been talking about this new movement, this enlightenment of all these people trying to publish knowledge and philosophers working on knowledge. And they talked about it in derogatory terms. Edmund Burke calls it the all-conquering empire of knowledge and light. He hated it. He wanted the king to rule. He didn't want people to think for themselves. And in What is Enlightenment, in fact, Kant says, you know, you can't farm out your thinking to your monarch or to your priest or to anybody. So really a radical philosophy. And he actually says that listening to authorities, priests, kings, I'm trying to think of what else, you know, school teachers, listening to the great classics, listening to any kind of authority is like being a child. You're physically an adult, but not mentally. You haven't grown up or matured. And he says, and this is a quote, every man's vocation is thinking for himself. And he says the only thing that's required with enlightenment is freedom. And he means the most harmless kind of freedom, he says, to be able to make public use of reason at any given point. And of course, that wasn't always the case. You couldn't always make use of public reason. You'd be, you know, tortured as a heretic. But at this moment in history, there were enough republics and sort of loose enough monarchies that people could do so. And the motto of the Enlightenment, he says, is dare to think for yourself. Have the courage to use your own reason. Now, thinking for yourself, a lot of times when I talk about that, people think of it as just blindly adhering to their own opinions. That's not what enlightenment is. Enlightenment is questioning those opinions. Where did you get them? How did you get them? Are they true? If you test them this way or that, will they prove true? And basically, since you don't know where your opinions came from, they may have come from your parents or from things you learned when you were little. And, you know, you need to really investigate. You need to think for yourself, challenge and analyze everything. And as one of my last videos talked about, especially question things, ask questions, question everything, this little Enlightenment emblem says. So a feature of Enlightenment philosophy is that it privileged the subject. And by the subject, philosophers meant you and me, our minds. A subject is a thinking or feeling entity, a person. The conscious mind, the mind of a person, the ego. And it's especially as exposed to something external to the mind or the world. And then the other thing that the Enlightenment defined was object. You have a subject and an object. A subject is a thinking being, and an object is something that person looks at. Well, that kind of division of the world, that kind of bifurcation, people call it a fundamental dualism, between subjects and objects caused all kinds of philosophical problems, beginning with Descartes sitting at his fire and asking, how do I know I'm not dreaming, right? So one of the problems that it fostered is the philosophical problem of, how do I, as a subject, know that the external world, objects in the world really exist? Like, how do I know I'm not dreaming them, or that they don't disappear when I turn around? But even though it caused a lot of skepticism philosophically, the Enlightenment is a great program. It privileges thinking, rational public thinking, where you not only present your thoughts, but argue them logically and get people to counter argue and think about their counter arguments, and all together kind of work towards some rational truth. And it fosters a belief in progress. Steven Pinker has recently written a book called Enlightenment Now. Of course, it was the 18th century, but what he wants is he wants people to really depend upon reason, science, humanism, and progress. Because if you think that rationality can lead us further towards truth, or scientific discovery can lead us further towards truth, then it's possible for the world to progress. And I think the reason Steven Pinker published this book so recently is because a lot of those values have been called into question. And, among intellectuals, the Enlightenment was called into question much earlier, after World War II, when people discovered the concentration camps. They started arguing that Enlightenment led to terrorism or genocide of that sort. And that reason was too hard a taskmaster. And people have argued a lot of intellectuals have argued against thinking about progress for all kinds of reasons, some of which are good. I won't go over those now. But to me, and to people like Jürgen Habermas, a German philosopher, the real problem with Enlightenment is that we haven't actually tried it yet. We haven't, thought for ourselves and encouraged our children growing up to think for themselves. Children are, their questions are squashed all the time. I see it day in and day out. So maybe we shouldn't dismiss Enlightenment until we try it. But it's been supplanted by a new kind of philosophy, which is absolutely fascinating and wonderful. And it's about the fact that subjects aren't so separate, that that there's a thing called intersubjectivity. That is something built up between two people that's different from each of those people individually. So here's the classic Rodin statue of the thinker. And it's falling apart. It's falling into pieces. Or maybe what we're seeing are the pieces that it's made up of, all the things that go into being a thinker in the world. And the key concept of this new philosophy is entanglement, that we are entangled in the world. We're not just minds sitting in a dish or a vat thinking. All of our thinking happens in our bodies as our bodies move around, and thinking doesn't just happen in the brain, it happens in the body too. One reason I think that we're so interested in entanglement, I mentioned that mass printing spurred on Enlightenment thinking. It proposed to people the idea that if you could get everybody to think, not just the elite, the elite thinkers would think and they would lead everybody on the great path of being good and doing the right thing. Instead, you send out all the materials that people need to think rationally on their own via mass print, and then the world will just be filled with enlightened. It won't just be confined to the elite. Well, and I think our technologies also encourage or were stimulated themselves by this concept of entanglement. And I'm just showing you some, technology tangles here. One of which I'm sure you're pretty used to, which is your earbuds, untangling them, and what you might call this tangle here is a resistance in the materials. So, you can use your phone for a private conversation, but you're yelling to your phone while you're trying to untangle these, and the phone says something out loud that a whole bunch of people shouldn't hear. Well, are cell phones private? Not exactly. So, and it's because of resistance in the materials. They may be designed to be exactly private with these earbuds, but they're not. And of course, computers, what problems computers have, we all are too aware of at this moment in our lives. So one key definition, instead of subject and object, the notion of who this philosophy is about, not subjects and objects in the philosophy of entanglement, is agent. And an agent is any person or thing that takes an active role or produces an effect. So I'm an agent to you right now because I'm talking to you and I'm trying to convey an idea. PowerPoint's an agent. PowerPoint organized my ideas for me, and maybe the way that I'm conveying my ideas differ because of the PowerPoint. Zoom is also an agent. You listening to me are agents, and one of the things that I really miss about face-to-face classes is how important it is to have feedback when you're lecturing and to, stop for discussion, because otherwise I don't know, what I'm saying that's hearable or makes sense to you or is even relevant to you. So you have to tell me some other way since we're not face to face. So entanglement has this notion of agent. And agents, one thing that I think is really interesting is that in philosophy now, humanity isn't privileged. Humans are agents, so are computers, so are tables, so are mountains, so are rocks. And so what you're thinking about is the interaction of objects with each other, agential objects with each other. And he says that Graham Harman, who's a famous philosopher in this new philosophy, also called object-oriented ontology or speculative realism, he says, thinking is only one way of relating to an object. So sometimes I'm, thinking about my cat. Sometimes I'm petting my cat. Sometimes I kick my cat. I don't kick her hard. I just need to get her to go away. But, it's pusher is what I do. But at any rate, there are all different ways of interacting, and no one way is better than any other. And that's really kind of startling to an Enlightenment universe which made the human mind supreme. So one of the principles of entanglement that you will get from watching the little video for this week about Karen Barad is interaction. And, what I've been talking about is the interaction among objects, right? And the reason she wants to change the notion of interaction, a subject and an object interacting, two agents interacting, a person interacting with a computer or a screen, the reason she wants to change that from interacting to interaction is because she says the boundaries between those agents are constituted by the activity. So, if we had bodies that dissolved, and maybe they do a little bit on a microscopic level, when we swam, our body would be constituted by what's left after the dissolution from the water. Well, that's kind of a sci-fi way of exaggerating this, but really, there is a kind of entanglement. Whenever I start to think about delivering a lecture now, even way before COVID, I mean, maybe in the last 10 or 15 years, I do it via a PowerPoint. I even now outline arguments that I'm going to make via a PowerPoint. So where does the PowerPoint app, where does my brain leave off and the PowerPoint app begin? When I'm thinking in my mind, I'm thinking in terms of organizing slides and organizing my argument that way. So interaction, things are mutually constituting. And this famous document, the Declaration of Independence, you can think of that as some great minds sitting in a room and coming up with the idea for our Constitution. But we, the people, were actually constituted. Who we are is constituted by those people in the room, the pen, the quilt pen, the candlelight, the mail, the newspaper that printed it, the horses that carried the mail and the newspapers, the ships that carried the mail and the newspapers to England, back to England. It's constituted by all of those things. We, the people, emerges out of this technology, out of this technological ecology. And I'm just going to go over now what affordances are. And affordances try to describe how we interact with technology, which presumes, a subject, humans, an object, technology. But as you'll see, as affordances get further and further defined, they become less about subject and object and more about agents interacting. And I think you'll be able to think about, affordances that you see in the social media platforms that you prefer for your assignment better in terms of interaction than anything else, I hope. So this is from the Sage Handbook of Social Media called The Affordances of Social Media Platforms. I'm going to have to move my little, okay. So the features of a platform, they're like a favorite button, a like button. They say and suggest things. What those features say and suggest or afford is not set once and for all. And you know that because you've seen changes in your social platforms, maybe not in the actual technology or features, but definitely in your stream, depending upon what you view. And with Instagram or even Twitter, which changes very rarely, and Facebook, you do see all kinds of technological changes as well. Now, these changes are developed according to a feedback loop. Feedback loops and generative roles of users shape social media. The two are algorithmically entangled. So in other words, the digital environment does not merely offer to its users to fill their needs and likings. Instead, the user's needs and preferences are fed back to the developers, and the developers follow those in developing new features. So you end up with a feedback loop where people using social media actually generate how it changes, how its features change. And notice that all the things that you use in those platforms, again, are what they see, what they say and suggest to you, what they allow you to do are affordances. And here are some good definitions of affordances. What material artifacts enable people to do? really affordances are about the possibilities for action. If you're in a social platform and you want to suddenly record a video and you can't, well, you can't and you won't do it, or you'll switch to another platform. And I think, for instance, the story feature on Snapchat, everybody loved that. It spread to Instagram and it spread to Facebook. So in design, and I wanted to say that the definition of affordances originally comes from somebody who was interested in the ecology of perception, a man called James Gibson, and he discussed it in 1979. And Donald Norman talked about it in terms of design, and it was a real breakthrough for designers. He said, you know, what you need to do as a designer is create an object that actually tells its user, its perceiver, somebody looking at it, how to use it. So, you know, if you see a door handle that's really, really long and and is raised, you'll push it. If you have to pull it to open the door, you'll be really surprised and frustrated. That's bad design. You know, if you want to pull to open a door, you want to see a handle. So using pushy things and handles in interfaces, but also, I mean, because screens don't actually have buttons to press, right? They're flat. I mean, you can touch them. It's a touch screen, but you actually don't have to press. And in fact, if you just hold your finger really close and don't actually touch, it'll still go. I do that all the time by accident. Okay, so affordances, a design, creating an object that tells people how to use it. And there's so many instances of bad design. You know, I was just using my curling iron this morning, and there's this thing on it that's a dial, and when you twist it, it goes click, 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 click. So I always thought it was a timer because it's got like, 20 minutes on it, it looks like, and you bump it every time every time you're curling your hair. So I thought, oh, it's a timer. Turns out it's the temperature control. Well, really, you need to make a temperature control look and act like a temperature control. I discovered that by burning my hair. So affordances then are designed to suggest to people how to do things, to enable action, to offer possibilities of action. Affordances constrain, control, and produce behaviors. I want to say that because affordances are imaginative as well. So I don't know if this happens to you. Well, I'll give you two illustrations because I'm older, so I've been through many technological developments. When the Sony Walkman first came out, when it was first possible to walk with earphones in your ears that played music, I would imagine when I walked that I was in a movie, because that's the only place I'd ever seen anybody walking with music on. Do you guys do that with phones when you're listening and walking? At any rate, I don't know. But affordances, the other thing is, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. But imaginatively, since I started using Facebook and Twitter, when I'm thinking about things, I often imagine it in the form of a tweet. Like, how would I tell people that I had this thought? So I imagine it in, a short 140 characters, or a Facebook post. I imagine it as a Facebook post. And that's how I think through what I'm thinking in those forms. Now, any child with any object will explore it in all kinds of ways and figure out all kinds of affordances that you didn't even know were there. So I remember flying with my kids when they were really little, and I was thinking, dang, I should have brought toys. They don't have any toys. What did I do? And they had drinks in front of them that had been served, and the little straws, those little, really thin straws that go in the drink to stir it. And there was ice in there, and they'd finished their drinks. And I turn around, and my son and daughter are skewering the ice cubes. They had holes in the middle with their little straws and going, so kids will discover affordances of objects that you couldn't even imagine were there. Now, this is where I want to talk about the difference in affordances. So the cell phone, you really can, walk and talk, and you can drive and talk with hands-free. And when you look at pictures of people talking, they have ways of making themselves heard and of listening through the little headphone things with the microphone in it, or they just hold it to their head. They never do what I do, which is because I grew up with this. When you have a phone that looks like this, you immediately want to hook it on your shoulder and hold it up to your ear that way, because it just fits right there, right around your neck. Okay. So that's what I do with my cell phone, which causes me to hang up on people, take pictures of people, turn people on speakerphone, all with my cheek hitting buttons accidentally. My children hate me for it. So in thinking about affordances, I want you to, I want you to think about possible abstract ways of thinking about it and possible specific ways. Move up and down in levels of abstraction. And you don't have to do that in your assignment. I think specific is really good in your assignment. But when we're talking about affordances, always try to think of concrete instances, because people will talk about very abstract words. Experts say mobile phones afford portability, availability, locatability, and multimediality. Multimediality. So you can be filming, recording, talking, and doing all kinds of multimedia projects with your phone. They're of course portable. They're widely available. The first time peoples in Africa had phone service who lived in villages where there were no, telephone wires coming to them, now have it with cell phones. Locatability, you can always figure out where somebody is with their cell phone. And specifics, though, and the specifics of the social media platforms, are buttons, screens, platforms. And so we're going to think about the kinds of interactions that specifically that each one affords, and you'll just pick one in your assignment. So this article in Sage says affordances enable and constrain communicative action. It may help you to think about, your goal when you use a social platform as being the goal is to communicate. And affordances reflect co-evolution of users and the environment. And that's really crucial. So we'll talk about that more in a minute. It begins by understanding that social media platforms afford different things to a user, an end user, which is us, the public, a developer, the person doing the programming and writing the algorithms, and an advertiser. Co-evolution is about, and it happens in nature, the fact that certain plants will evolve that especially attract certain kinds of birds who evolve to be able to harvest the pollen from those kinds of plants. They co-evolve. This bird with a long beak, this plant with a long, I don't know even what you call it, but blossom that contains pollen that the long beak can go down into and get. It's marvelous, really. And in the evolution of platforms, there's a multi-directionality, right? Because algorithms constitute a hidden affordance. Algorithms are constantly harvesting what you do, what causes you to switch from one function to another, or one screen or image to another. And it records what you seem to like best, feeds it back to the developers who then evolve the platform. Remember, advertisers are really concerned with engaging attention as long as possible. And so they are going to do everything that they can do to engage your attention. The personalization of advertising and of social media streams is really amazing. When I first started using Twitter, it had a star, not a like button. And then it got this little heart, and I thought, oh, well, it's impolite to read tweets and not like them. You got to show people that, they're doing well and you like them. So I clicked all the hearts. You can't believe what my stream started looking at. And I realized, oh my gosh, my stream, the design of what information I'm getting is reacting to what I say I like. So I, clicked this one person who I didn't really want to listen to what she said, but I thought, oh, the poor thing, so I clicked a heart. Well, now suddenly all her, postings are on my Twitter feed. So, I realized that the heart does not afford just being a supportive, polite person. What it affords is you saying what you really like so that you get the information you really like in the future. And so the move towards algorithmically sorted feeds, maybe not just by timeline, maybe by popularity, but also by what you click on that you like, is really about this co-evolution of user and social media environment. So when you're doing your assignment and thinking about, an affordance or a couple of affordances in your social media environment, what they enable you to do, what they constrain, how they've affected your thinking. One way to do it is to focus on changes in your platform. Did a change happen that you really didn't like? And why? What did it prevent you from doing that you usually like doing? That's the easiest way to figure out an affordance. So I'm going to stop the PowerPoint now and see if there are any questions from the, oh, I gotta get out of here. There we go. From anybody. Does anybody here have any thoughts or questions or comments? I mean, can you think of a feature that you lost that you loved?
There's not any particular feature for me, but just how apps have updated their interface over the years, and it's never been anything better, but they think it is. And so that's kind of what I think when I think of losing something like that, because I know with Snapchat especially have had 3 different updates and they're all terrible, but they just keep doing it and keep trying to push because they think it's better.
That's really funny. They're clearly they need to work on their algorithms for reading what people like. Or maybe people like me are pressing hearts because they're trying to be polite. I don't know. I don't know if there's hearts in Snapchat, but yeah, and it's hard to learn them, isn't it? I'm having a hard time. My daughter told me though that it's much easier to use Instagram if you've lived through all the changes. Do you think that's true, Danielle? Oh, I'm sorry. Your name is Peyton.
Yeah, I don't mind.
I'm so
Daniel
sorry.
Or Peyton. I'm in the military, so I'm used to being called Daniel. It's no big deal.
Sorry. It's all right. Yeah, one of the affordances I don't like of Zoom is that it has your last name, comma, first name.
I know. I always mean to change it, and then I always am really bad at changing that.
That's okay. Go ahead, Peyton. I'm sorry.
I was on Instagram for a couple of months, probably when it was first released. It was 8-9 years ago. And then compared to now, I definitely like the interface more, but I do kind of agree that living through the updates gets easier to kind of get used to it. It still might not be the best ever, getting rid of features, adding features, whatever. One thing that I just kind of thought of is YouTube, their iPhone app. Within the past few months, they have changed where they put the comments. Oh. Everybody hated it. And they still have it like that. It is one of the weirdest changes I've ever seen made in an app. Yeah. And I don't think it's anything better, but they are, I guess, adamant to keep it. And if it weren't for, me being so, on YouTube so much, I probably wouldn't have noticed it, but it still makes it harder. And I could imagine people who like just start using the app could be kind of confused by it, because it's not where comments are like for any streaming service you use.
Yeah. So, the other thing is that they have to follow each other. Twitter changed the star to a heart because newbies to Twitter couldn't understand what the star meant. And if you made it a heart, it was just like then in Facebook where you like it, So when they switch something from the standard way of doing things, it's really hard to figure out. So that's a bad affordance, I would say. In the comments, Lily said she liked the feature on Instagram that showed what other people liked and the feature on Snapchat that showed other people's best friends. Those are two affordances. And Laura chimed in and said, yeah, really, I liked looking at people's best friends. And she also said she agrees with you, Peyton, that the YouTube comments were better at the bottom. So where are they now?
They're like right below where the video is. So it's like the video box, the description, like the little follow button, and then the comments, I think is how it works. I mean, I'm not on YouTube currently, so I don't know for sure.
Yeah. I bet the reason they did it is so that people could more easily make comments on small screens like phones or tablets, because then it would all still be there. I don't know.
Possibly. I like scrolling through comments when I watch YouTube videos. I think that's one of the most entertaining things ever. So the change, I was not super into it, because I would go read the description of the video as I'm watching it. Then it has like the recommended and suggested videos. So I'd look at those, kind of figure out if there's anything else I want to watch next. And then I'd scroll down to the comments all the way at the bottom. And so now that they're higher up, I don't feel like I see as many other suggested videos as I typically would. And another thing with this comment box change, it used to be where you just scroll down, it would pull them up. Now you have to click the comments to get to them, and you have to exit out of them, and you have to, if you click a comment to read the whole thing and read the replies to it, you have to back out of that page on the left side of the screen instead of the right side. If you click the right button, it'll close all the comments. It just was not a very well thought out change.
So what I want to say to you, Peyton, is I'm actually going to go give you a grade for having done your assignment, because you just did it right here on the video. Thank you.
Oh, that's exciting. Is it the one that was due on Friday, or?
Yeah, the one on Friday.
Okay, all right.
6.3, you're done.
Amazing. And then there was no assignment on the 6.1, right?
That's right. No assignment 6.1. You
Okay.
That was canceled because I was so late with everything.
Perfect.
And
that worked out too, because I got the essay done that day.
That's good. So Lily and Laura, you are on your way talking about those features. Just expand that, what you said in the comments, into, a paragraph or two, and you're done too. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, well, it's great seeing you guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.